Welcome to the Long COVID podcast with me, Jackie Baxter. I am really excited to bring you today's episode. Please do check out the links in the show notes where you can find the podcast website, social media and support group, as well as a link to buy me a coffee if you are able. You should not rely on any medical information contained in this podcast and related materials in making medical, health-related or other decisions. Please do consult a doctor or other health professional. I love to hear from you. If you've got any suggestions or feedback or just want to say hey, then please do get in touch. I really hope you enjoy this episode, so here we go. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Long COVID podcast. I'm delighted to be joined again by Dan Neufer, who has been on the podcast before, so some of you may know him already. Dan is the author of CFS Unraveled. He's created the ANS Rewire program, which has been mentioned by some of my recovery guests. Is also a wonderful person and has lived experience from having recovered from CFS himself. So is extremely qualified to be here. So Dan, thank you so much for being here. It is super excited to have you back, and I'm really interested to get into today's topic.
Thank you very much for inviting me back. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, Jackie, and I love the deeply insightful questions that you ask, and I feel like often they're questions that perhaps people who are still seeking recovery don't necessarily understand or appreciate why they would be important. And so it makes it a great conversation. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to today as well. So much so that I got up at 6:30 this morning to do it. So
Ooh.
guys, this one's for you. It was still dark. It was still dark. So today's conversation is going to be around beliefs or belief. And we're going to get into kind of what this actually means in just a moment, because this is something that comes up a lot. But I think we possibly don't always understand what it means or why it's relevant, or even if we do understand those things, how to actually go about it. So let's start off. Dan, what is belief?
So belief is, I mean, people have different definitions. From my point of view, belief is the knowledge that something is true. So it is the proposition that we go, this is happens to be a true thing. And if that gels with us, then we can call it a belief. And and I think it is an absolute essential part of recovery from chronic illnesses that involve either dysfunction and or neuroplasticity. Um, and illness like post-viral fatigue syndrome, or often long COVID as it's referred to, um, they fall in both categories, dysfunction and an illness that involves neuroplasticity. So that makes belief doubly important.
Right. So you say that dysfunction and neuroplasticity, other illnesses,
Mhm.
maybe that have structural stuff, for want of a better word, going on. Would you say
Mm.
belief is important there as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so this is a good place to start because
Mm,
like people are like, I'm sick. Why are you thinking about belief? Is this some kind of voodoo, right? But let's
mm,
give you a very simple example. Let's say you have, let's give the easiest. Let's say you have an infection and really nasty infection in hospital. And the doctor says we have to give you antibiotics. And you go, I don't believe the antibiotics can help me. Then what will happen is they'll give you the antibiotics. You won't take the antibiotics and you won't benefit from them because antibiotics don't work. They don't work in the drawer, in the pill box, in the pharmacy. They only work when you swallow them. or if you get injected. They only work when they're in your body. And the thing that causes them to be in your body is your belief that taking them will be helpful. If you look at an illness with dysfunction, you might think of diabetes. Okay, if we look at type 2 diabetes, well, that's an illness that people can recover from. It's not really complicated, but in order for them to do that, they need to moderate their lifestyle and their diet. And if they don't think it's true that a change in lifestyle and diet will cause their diabetes to go away, I'm talking type 2, of course, um, then they won't do those things, right? And it's the same with something that involves neuroplasticity. Let's say, as an example, we pick somebody who's had a stroke. Okay. If your great grandfather, when he had a stroke, if someone had come up to them and say, "Oh, okay, you can't walk now, but we're gonna pretend you can walk. Just think you can move your leg," and then sees them shuffling their leg forward, he would have gone, "What kind of rubbish is this? You think I'm stupid? The doctor told me my brain is damaged. I can't fix it. And obviously, I'm not moving my leg. That's you moving my leg. Like you're taking me for a ride. This is crazy talk, right?" But now, we've learned about neuroplasticity. We've learned that this can happen in the adult brain, um, thanks to, wonderful researchers like Dr. Merzenich, who really pioneered neuroplasticity. And with the invention, which led to the invention of the cochlear implant, right? And yeah, so now people know you can recover from stroke to various degrees in various people. And they have therapists that literally go to them and, do these weird things that without context would seem ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But with context and education and the patient's belief that this can help, they go through the pain and difficulty and discipline and they show up every day. They do the work, they learn to walk. So that's why I think belief really matters because it shapes our behavior.
So, in order to commit to doing something, whether it's taking a pill or doing a breathing exercise or, moving your leg, whatever those actions are, we're only going to do them if we have some sort of belief in the fact that they are actually going to have an impact.
Yeah, look, does this sound familiar? Right? You get told a story. This supplement or this whatever will work. And you're kind of like, oh, I'm not sure, right? So you do it, let's say half-heartedly, but maybe in the beginning you do it properly. But for how long? 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 1 week, maybe 2 weeks. Wow, you're doing amazing. 2 weeks. No changes? Nothing's happening. Why am I doing this? This is not working, right? See, we as human beings are really wired for short-term feedback. And you do something, like nobody who has diabetes, like, has a day of eating, proteins, salad, and a small amount of carbohydrates that are complex and is then cured of their disease. That doesn't work. So, so the point is, you have to keep doing it. And I think most of us kind of go, there's not enough evidence. Everything's hard when you're sick. Doing all whatever it is, it's really hard to find the motivation. Why am I trading off my little bit of pleasure of doing something else with the limited energy that I have? Why should I be doing breathing exercises? Yeah, I've been breathing all my life. What's the point, right? If we don't understand what the why and the science behind it, then I think we are less likely to follow through. And that's the key word here is follow through. So this isn't about pretending or positive thinking or anything like that. It's just about choosing a stance that's going to support change in your life and in your well-being.
We'll be right back. I'm interrupting myself for a second to tell you about long COVID breathing. The fabulous Vicky Jones and I have teamed up to bring you long COVID breathing. We are both passionate about sharing our expertise and experience of the breath and how incredibly helpful that can be with long COVID. We've worked together to develop a course that is specifically tailored to those with long COVID. It's a 6-week course with 12 sessions, all delivered online. The community feel and learning that we're all sharing is such a joy. To find out more information and to sign up for our courses, workshops, and other shorter sessions, please check out the link below, longcovidbreathing.com, or email longcovidbreathing@gmail.com to start your breathing journey with us. And I love what you were just saying about understanding, because this was key for me. Like if someone had said, do this thing, my first question would have been, why? Like I was the why child. Why? And I still am. I still am the why child. And like I need to understand on some level why would I do these things? So for me, understanding a little bit about the kind of science behind breathing exercises, for example, oh, okay, it does that, it influences this, it influences that, that's going to help that. That was when I was then able to go, okay, yeah, that makes a bit of sense. Now I can commit to doing this. Whereas, if someone had just said, do this breathing exercise, I would probably have, like you said, been like, well, that sounds a bit woo-woo. I don't think that's really going to make any difference. I've been, as you say, breathing all my life. I don't see how the way I breathe is going to have any impact on anything. But that little bit of understanding did give me the kind of like, okay, let's give it a try then. That makes some logical sense to me. So I think that really was helpful. And, I think we can then go too far. And again, I am the patient saint of going too far. When we then, try to understand too much, whereas
Mm,
actually, stop understanding and get experiencing. So I think there is probably
mm,
also a balance to be struck there. But for me, certainly having some understanding was crucial.
mm. Well, belief is formed in different ways, and there are limitations to a one-faceted approach like science and understanding. So,
Mm,
yeah, and I'm sure we'll get to that as we sort of go through today. But yeah, I think I totally agree with you.
yeah.
I totally agree with you. Yeah.
So you mentioned that, in order to do something consistently and commit to it and to stick to it for more than 2 weeks, that belief is really important. Um, does this also work against us? So if we say, okay, well, you know, I can't get better, there is no cure. So what's the point?
Mm,
Like that's kind of like the flip side of that, isn't it? That's the opposite belief
mm.
or an unbelief.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Belief can cut both ways, and I think this is particularly an issue with an illness like long COVID, where quality, factual, science-based information has not necessarily been the primary experience from when it started. In fact, yeah. So, because the thing is, I mean, give you just an example why negative beliefs are unhelpful. If you truly think this is as good as it can get with your recovery, if that's your belief, that's going to lead to resignation. I mean, if this is as good as it gets, why would you just because there's a bit of a mental anguish in chasing solutions and working towards your recovery. I mean, it isn't just about the physical, efforts, but it's this mental roller coaster, and it's easier to just go, okay, this is good enough. This is where I'm going to be. Now I won't do anything. But that kind of resignation is going to affect all your little daily choices. It's going to stop you making progress. And I think people can get really overwhelmed with like negative stories or negative narratives. There's a lot of really fearful stuff a lot of fear mongering since, in this last 5 years in particular. And I mean, you can make a wonderful case for something that may or may not be true. If you listen to it enough, it sounds true, it's compelling. And obviously your own experience kind of backs it up because you're still sick. And so it's so easy to fall into that trap. Um, so yeah, I think a belief can be a driver of recovery, or it can be a quiet limiter that can keep us stuck.
Mm. And you mentioned resignation there. And I'm curious about what you think the difference between resignation and acceptance is. Because the word acceptance, I mean, I hated the word acceptance to start with. Someone said, "Oh, you need to find acceptance with your condition." And I said, "No, I will never accept that this is my life forever. Like, I will never, ever accept that." And that's what I thought that they meant. And that may have been what some people meant, but what I kind of came to the conclusion eventually for me was that it was acceptance of the moment, so I could finally stop fighting, and accept where I was and then work from there. So I'm curious as to how you, because that resignation sounds like a negative thing, whereas acceptance, I would say, in that context is a good thing.
I think you sum it up perfectly, Jackie. I mean, this is exactly how I teach it to people. And the issue is, and I would go as far as to say is that the person who told you to accept it probably was talking about resignation, not
Mm.
acceptance, the way you and I think about it. So, yeah, um, many people, when I speak to them, the one thing that really has helped them in their recovery is suddenly going, often being worse, having this low point and suddenly going, that's it, I'm done with it. I'm not going to deal with this. I can't accept this anymore, right? And at the same point, other people will say, okay, that's it. I finally get it. I'm really sick. I'm going to change my life and just accept my limitations for now, right? But it's those little nuances, accept it for now, right? I can't live like this, so I'm going to do something about it. That's very different than, oh, I accept that I'm ill and I'll be ill forever. So acceptance, it needs to be a bit qualified. What do you mean by acceptance? And you pointed that out straight away, and I think that is absolutely essential. Yeah.
So it's almost like two sides of a similar thing, isn't it? And like I think, as you say, that for now qualifier is
Yes.
something that I heard someone else say, and I kind of really took that on. So every time I was like, I can't do this, I can't do that, it was always, okay, I can't do this for now, because
Mm.
it's that hope for the future, isn't it? That we have to have, because it's such a dark place when you don't have that.
It's complicated. Let me be devil's advocate for a moment, right? So easy just to write your own beliefs and viewpoints. And you and I are obviously on the same page here. But from a psychologist's point of view, right? If you have an illness that is incurable, which is basically all illnesses, but let's talk about this group of illnesses, CFS, fibro, POTS, post-viral fatigue syndrome, long COVID, call it what you like. Um, and so if the model is, the medical model is you can't recover from this illness, and then you chasing all these recoveries and treatments and ideas causes all this stress and anguish because you keep getting disappointed. So from that point of view, it would be much more logical and healthy from a psychological point of view just to accept this fate. Okay, I am going to be sick and there's nothing I can do about it. I accept this and I'll just learn to live with it. And that's what they try and teach. And it's with good reason because this is really something that works for most people with many conditions. You know, okay, you lose both your legs, your life's going to be different, right? Now, there are, of course, people who don't accept this and somehow find a way to live a life that they shouldn't be able to with both their legs gone or legs and arms gone and all this kind of thing. But to some extent, no matter what they do and no matter how fantastic superhero like they are, their life's going to be impacted and there has to be some level of acceptance. Um, so yeah, there's a real argument to be made to this, but of course, this is all on a premise. It's all on the belief that this illness is not something you can recover from. And if that is your belief, then straight acceptance is the best path forward. But of course, a belief, if you ask me what's belief, and I said it has to do with what you believe to be true, what you hold true. I'd like to go further to say that I'd like personally form my beliefs based on evidence, on science. So therefore, if we see evidence that people can recover, having a belief that you can't is wrong. It's the wrong belief. It's like I can believe that the sun doesn't come up. That can be my belief, yes, but the sun still comes up. Yeah. I can believe I can breathe underwater. Yeah. And this is sort of the world we live in these days, isn't it? There's a lot of beliefs these days that people like to hold that are contrary to the fact and evidence of what we know scientifically to be a fact. Um, so that's a bit of a society
Mm.
challenge, I would say. Mm.
And I suppose I don't know if the word easy is the right word, but like we can find evidence to back up what we believe. It's like that kind of, when you go looking for something, you can usually find
Mm.
it, and you can believe that the sun doesn't rise. And actually, you can believe that for quite a few hours before it will come up.
Absolutely.
And if you live in Scotland and it's cloudy, actually you can sort of still believe that it hasn't because, well, you can't see it. To use a really silly example. Um,
Yeah.
so if we think about like long COVID or ME/CFS, you think, well, you know, chronic fatigue has been around for decades, and there's all these people that haven't recovered. Therefore, I'm going to be just like them.
Yes.
And maybe one person has recovered. Oh well, I can maybe explain that away. Because there's all these people that haven't.
They didn't have it.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe they didn't have the real one,
They didn't really have the illness.
or they weren't as ill as I was.
Exactly, exactly. And so that was really the whole drive for me to write CFS Unraveled. People always think that CFS Unraveled was written to so that people know how they can recover. I had to put some of that in because it seemed inappropriate not to, but even the stuff that I put in about how to recover wasn't really, that wasn't my primary motivation. My primary motivation was to deepen people's belief into the explanation for the root cause of this illness. Yes, because that was really what all of the book is about. It's having, because when you have the full context of the physiological, the biochemical processes in your brain, the neurology, all of it, that suddenly explains why one person recovers and the other one doesn't. Why one person gets ill from this and the other person gets ill from something different. Why one person recovers with one action, the same action doesn't work for somebody else. Why they have different symptoms. I mean, all of that, it's so muddled that no wonder some people out there say, oh, it's not a real illness or it's a different connection of illnesses or when people can't make a diagnosis. That's not true. It's just not fact that this is a distinct illness. And it's not just the, default diagnosis when we don't know what's wrong. It has clear patterns that leads to the onset, that leads to the symptoms and recovery. And because it's a little bit complicated, because it's a central nervous system illness, right? Which has so many secondary dysfunctions, there's so many biological, biochemical problems in the body that people experience, the whole thing gets so muddled. Yeah. And so I wrote the book so that people could understand all of this because if you can answer all the questions, then your belief is going to be strong. But if you can sort of go, oh, yeah, that's good, but blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And by the way, if people have a but, I'd be happy to come back on an episode They can list all their buts, why this isn't the case and why they think it's something else. And we can have that discussion because, occasionally I will actually do that with people I have in a program. Most people are already, their beliefs are deeply aligned, especially by the time they start to get results, then you've got so much proof. But when I see people having some doubts or concerns, I always address it. So I encourage anyone listening to just bombard you with all their reasons why ANS dysfunction is not central. Because when you get these questions answered and resolved, it gives you confidence to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, send us your butts. Um,
Yeah. Uh-oh, you better get some kind of a filter on your email.
I know. I just thinking, yeah, oops. But I think you're right. I said already, I'm the why person. I'm the one that will always have more questions. The more you understand, the more questions, as you say, that get answered, it makes more and more sense. And then, that helps to strengthen that belief, I suppose, doesn't it? Because they can feel very fragile, I think, and particularly in an illness such as long COVID, ME/CFS, where things can feel very uncertain. Things, they are so fluctuating. The recovery trajectory is non-linear. It's all over the place. It looks a bit like Mr. Tickle with his arms everywhere, doesn't it? And it's so easy for those beliefs, even if we've built them up to some extent, for them to kind of come crumbling down it takes very little to bring them down sometimes. So I think that is really, really
Mm.
important. But we've kind of jumped over a little bit because we're assuming that people have beliefs. Um, let's go back to people who maybe don't have belief and
Mhm.
like how can we start to develop that?
Mm.
And, yeah, people who feel like they don't have it, and it just feels impossible. Like, how can I ever believe something that I sort of, maybe even they're like, I feel like I'd like to believe it, but I don't, kind of, thing.
Yeah, look, if I may just sort of bring to the front just another aspect of this,
Mm,
of why it's so important. Before we talk about forming the beliefs, it's like, well, okay, we talk about the action, but there's actually more to it than just
mm.
actions. There's other reasons why belief is important, and I think the chief one here is because belief also changes what we notice. So some people call this like the law of attraction, which sounds like it's some sort of magic thing, right?
Sounds like we're starting a dating platform.
Yeah, 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 exactly. That's right, exactly. Where people send you pictures of their butt. Um, but it's the reticular activating system that's really the brain's internal filter. So from a neurological point of view, this isn't some sort of a weird random thing or some, woo-woo kind of thing. Um, the amount of information that comes into your brain is just staggering. Um, the people who are listening to this podcast right now are ignoring 90% of what's going on around them, which can be a bit of a problem if you're driving. So, um, because you have a limited amount of attention, right? There's all kinds of stuff going on in your vision that you're hearing in your body and what you're feeling. Um, and we tend to filter it out and hone in our attention to just a few things. And what happens is that when we have a belief, you asked earlier about about how beliefs are formed and supporting the beliefs. Well, one of the things people tend to do is to tend to have a bias to support the belief. And so if your belief is, that I don't know, all red cars get broken easily, then every time you hear of a red car that's broken, you say, "See, I told you." But if you don't think that, you wouldn't even notice that there's a red car that got broken. And in fact, if you think that red cars are fantastic and blue cars are the ones that get broken, you might even kind of just not notice it at all. You just skip over it. Um, so this is why I think belief is important. It's there's also, you know, there's also a deeper existential reason, which is what you were talking about. Um, because living with hope does give you better quality of life, yeah, if you do it the right way. It can be a little bit of a desperation, which has that awful roller coaster of hope and disappointment. But if you can find hope that you can work towards, where you're getting small wins and evidence, then I think we also transform your experience of life. Yeah. So then belief is about action, belief is about noticing things differently, and belief is suddenly also about a change in mindset or mental health. And that's really part of the reasons why I think it's so important.
We'll be right back.
Hey there, I'm just jumping in for a second to see if you're enjoying this episode. If you're finding it useful, maybe you would consider sharing it somewhere, a friend, a group, or even on your Twitter feed. If everyone was able to share just once, we'd be able to get this information out to even more people who really, really need it. So please consider sharing somewhere if you possibly can. I hope you enjoy the episode, and thank you so much.
Yeah, and we talk about mindset, don't we? And it sounds, oh, it can often be taken as think yourself better.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not true. By thinking positively, it's not going to cure
Yes.
you, but it is also helping to pave the way for the actions and the behaviors and the changes and the
Yeah.
consistency that will, I suppose.
And I wonder if your listeners noticed what I did here. You started to ask me, well, so how do we develop positive beliefs? And I stopped and I backtracked. And the reason is because if you don't have the belief that beliefs are important, then you're not going to follow through with the actions to change your belief. So I felt we needed a little more evidence of why belief is so important. And it's kind of like, it's like the perfect story, isn't it? It really sort of explains it all.
Yeah, so it's about that, that understanding is important,
Mm.
but then starting to look for evidence
Yes.
to back that up. And and like, the example of recovery stories, for example, you have this belief because it's what you've experienced, it's what you've seen in other people, it might be what you've been told by medical professionals.
Mm.
Oh, long COVID, CFS, there isn't a cure. You're not going to get better. You're just going to have to learn to live with it. You're going to have to, manage your symptoms,
Mm.
and so many people are told that, and so many people maybe come to that conclusion on their own. But then we start to see other people recovering. I mean, the first person I ever spoke to who'd recovered totally changed my outlook because I had never met anyone who had. It was like everyone was sick. I was sick. Everything was dreadful. And then someone said, I'm fully recovered. And I was like, what? I need to speak to you. Tell me your story. What did you do? But it's again, that one piece of evidence, maybe it wasn't enough to fully make me believe that everything was going to be fine, but it certainly made me go, huh.
Mm. Well, it's a choice, isn't it?
Mm,
I just want to point out, you did that, but you made a choice, Jackie. You could have chosen to say, oh, that person didn't actually have it. Or that you could have chosen to say, well, that person is lucky or an anomaly. Yeah, it's not really possible. Or you could have said, all kinds of things. But you chose to lean towards a possibility rather than a limitation. Yeah. So that's a choice. So this is really, really important. Yeah. I spoke to someone that I'm quite close to, and he was abandoned as a young adult, and he ended up sort of not being quite homeless, but yeah, no connection at all, didn't know anybody, and he started to connect with gangs, gang members, and those gang members showed him some kindness. They showed him a connection, a family, and a life of crime. not so good. And he made the choice, which you think about it, in that position when you're so vulnerable and you got nothing. Yeah, he made the choice to, he says, I always have a choice, and it's my choice not to go down that road. So he went and enlisted in the army instead and found a different family. Yeah. And so yeah, it starts with the choice, but then you're right, it's evidence. But I think there's different layers.
Mm.
There's probably three layers of evidence. And I think the first one is that rational layer. Um, like what you're saying, I understand the science of recovery and neuroplasticity, and there's this logical explanation, like the book Cephas Unraveled, right? You can go through all this and now I understand why I have fatigue, and now I understand why my thyroid hormone is out of whack, and blah blah blah, and why I'm thirsty all the time, why I pee like a racehorse. Like it goes on and on. All the symptoms, the more of your symptoms get ticked off, the more you suddenly go, oh, okay, this makes sense, right? So that's the rational confidence. But then I think there is that social proof, like you experienced, right? And that it's difficult when you just hear one story, but what if you hear two? What about three? What about 300, 3,000? I started these recovery stories. They didn't exist when I started to do these, like over 10 years ago. No one, when I first went out and I went to some of these forums, and everyone's, was saying, "Well, what? You can't recover. What are you, a scam artist?" I'm like, I'm not selling anything. How can I be a scam artist? I wasn't selling anything. Do you know what I mean? I was just telling you my story and my understandings. But yeah, then we started these things, these these stories, which you've been part of, sharing your story, and so I think this is an important second level, right? Recognize there's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of stories. And then the third level, which is to me always essential whenever I speak to someone in the ANSWY program and we have a consult, my first question is, how are things going? Like, what is the progress? And they're often like, oh, the program's fantastic. I love the program, blah, blah, blah. I go, hang on a sec. Yeah, but have you actually made any progress? And sometimes they go, oh no, I haven't got any progress, but that's really great. And I feel so validated. And I'm like, okay, well, that's nice, but we need actual physical recovery progress. And the reason why I'm a bit of a hard ass about it is because that to me is the most important evidence, right? We need that personal evidence that it's working and that we are making recovery progress. And if we don't experience that, we have to change our approach, right? Because once we get that, we suddenly go, you remember what it was like, right? That feeling of suddenly, maybe this could really happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when was that moment for you when you first had enough progress? What do you remember what it was that you did, or how you felt that you suddenly go, I might really start to get better? Can you remember that moment?
It's like your world expands. It's like
Mm.
when you become unwell, your world shrinks, very dramatically, very, very quickly. And it's when you find that, I mean, for me, it was finding the first thing. I'd been doing all sorts of wrong things or not things at all or pushing through, and things had not been going well. They'd been getting worse or certainly not any better. And then I found the first thing. And that for me was like, okay, this is the first thing that I found that made things better. It didn't make everything loads better, but it made things a little bit better. And if they can get a little bit better, then I can be more intentional and they can get more better. It was kind of that possibility.
Yeah, it was a possibility, but you notice the choice you made
Mm,
along with it. Yes, you chose to say, okay, if I do that a little bit and I go a little bit better, I can choose to do more of that and have intention.
hmm.
Yeah. So this is these are things are all aligned, and this is why people talk about it as mindset. Yeah, and you aced it, from the get-go, right? Yeah, you're that's great. I don't think I did as anywhere near as good a job as
Oh, I
you.
made a right mess of it as well, believe me.
So my recovery, because I didn't know that anyone could recover. Yeah, it was only for me was the theory that led my experience. I didn't know that anyone had recovered, which is why I was so intent on sharing the recovery stories.
Which is why it's so important to share them, and why you and I are both so passionate about sharing recovery stories, and other people out
Yes.
there are doing the same. Because it's that burden of proof, but it's also the
Mm.
sheer number, the different stories. You can relate more to someone's story than another person's, and again, that makes it more relevant to you, and I suppose helps with that proof, doesn't it? Um, so like you were saying,
Yeah.
it's having that bit of understanding and some evidence from other people, but then you got to build your own evidence, haven't you? Starting to find those
Oh,
things and starting to put them into practice, and even if it's like a fraction of a percent, those little steps that you do things. I mean, one of my themes is always consistency. It's not a one and done. You don't do a breathing exercise and then that's it. Okay, I've done my breathing. It's that you've got to do that consistent breath practice every day, maybe multiple times a day. And it's not the amount, it's the consistency.
yes. Yes. In fact, sometimes less is more.
Mm,
But consistency is really everything. And just I just want everyone to know who's listening. We know you're not going to get it right. We
mm,
we know you're not going to be consistent. You don't have to worry that you think you can't do it, or when you're not consistent that you messed up. That's normal. We all, well, not all. I mean, I've met some, remarkable people who've gone through my program and had sort of, let's say, unlikely results. But for the human beings amongst us, right, the normal human beings like you and me, we all mess up. We all have periods where we lose our consistency. But the key is just to get back on the horse.
yeah,
And there's things we can do that help us with all of this.
yeah. And it's that idea of missing a day is okay. Use your get out of jail free card. Don't
Yeah,
let that missing a
yeah,
day become the start of a new pattern. So,
exactly.
let yourself off the hook. We're terrible at this, aren't we? We're very good at blaming ourselves and, being really harsh to ourselves. But
Mm,
actually, let yourself off the hook. You missed your breathing practice for a day. It's okay.
mm,
Just do it
yeah,
tomorrow or do it before you go to bed.
yeah,
As you say, get
yeah,
get back on that horse. Um,
yeah. Self-compassion. This is so important.
yeah, exactly. Self-compassion, the name of the game. Okay, so we're going to stop here for now because that's quite a nice place to leave it. And Dan and I will be back next week with the second part of this discussion where we talk more practically about how to build those beliefs and to maintain those beliefs and how to rebuild beliefs when they feel like they're crumbling. So, Dan, thank you. It's been awesome. Do tune back in next week and we'll see you then. Thank you so much to all of my guests and to you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, or at least found it useful. The Long COVID podcast is entirely self-produced and self-funded. I'm doing all of this myself. If you're able to, please go to buymeacoffee.com/longcovidpod to help me cover the costs of hosting the podcast. Please look out for the next episode of the Long COVID podcast. It's available on all the usual podcast hosting things. And do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you.